Did you start playing CSGO before or after Operation Hydra back in 2017? Your knowledge of Dust depends on this, for if you started playing after 2017, you'll only have played the 5th and most recent version of Dust 2, and you may never even have seen the first Dust, which is just crazy to think about. Did you know that Dust 1 used to be the game's most popular map? The stories for many of Counter-Strike's original maps have been lost, but not so with the Dusts. Their maker, Dave Johnston, hosts his own little blog where he covers their development in great detail. Rather surprisingly, Dust's development starts with Team Fortress 2. It was 1999, Dave was 16 and had just finished his exams. He loved Team Fortress, and the first images of Team Fortress 2 were leaked. It looks different to the Team Fortress 2 that we know today, because this version of Team Fortress 2 was effectively cancelled. But those early images of the game stuck with him. These in particular. He moved to playing Counter-Strike, where he made a map called CS Tyre, a hostage map that made it into the 3rd beta for the game. Back then, the game suffered from a lack of mappers. So perhaps because of this, one of the makers of Counter-Strike, Jess Cliff, contacted Dave and asked him if he wanted to make a map for the 4th beta. He chose to make Dust. Still inspired by Team Fortress 2, he went to his texture artist, Chris McMahon-Ashton, and asked if he could make a load of textures inspired from early Team Fortress 2 pictures. A texture pack was made, which he called Dest, which is short for Destiny. Dave seems to enjoy shortened names. Dust is already short, and his other map, Cobblestone, was shortened to Cobbable, and the map file is still called that to this day. If you want to know more about Dust's development, then you should check his blog out. He talks about it in detail. I'll link to it in the description. It's worth remembering that Counter-Strike only had a hostage game mode until Beta 4, so it wasn't until Dust was released that the game even had bomb defusal, which was what Dust was. Because of this, map development back then was less advanced than it is today. Dust was made one area at a time, and with very little planning. At one point, Underpass led to a huge underground chamber, but it wasn't fun or sunny, so it was quickly removed. He ended with T-Spawn, which is the area that he's most happy with, perhaps because by the time he reached that, he had mastered his map's theme. You can see in these comparison shots how much it was inspired by the Team Fortress 2 map. Dust only has 2 routes that the terrorists can choose from. They can either push through the underpass, or through the tunnel in the centre. He understood the importance of this section and took the time to get the timings right, and used crates to block lines of sight and to improve the map's optimization. He wanted to give CTs a slight advantage here. He then chose spawn positions and bomb plant spots using a combination of guesswork and logic. He chose these to be the positions for the bomb sites, with bomb site B being in the underpass. It must have been difficult to make a defuse map when the game mode didn't even exist, so he instead placed the bomb sites as though they were flags that needed to be captured, since Capture the Flag was at least a game mode that existed at the time. Playtesting was hosted in a different time zone, so Dave didn't even get to play his own creation. But Jess Cliff did, and suggested bomb site B was moved to CT Spawn. This was done, and the map was included in Beta 4, making it joint oldest defuse map ever made, together with Nuke and Prodigy. And it was only then that Dave got to play his own map. Dust quickly became one of Counter-Strike's most popular maps, and servers hosting it 24/7 soon began showing up. This map remained a community favourite for many years. Since terrorists only had 2 routes, you knew where they were going to come from and had plenty of time to prepare. You could even stand here, which would let you guard both entrances at once. Perhaps a better spot though was to snipe from here into Underpass. Terrorists approaching this route didn't stand a chance. Dave tried to weaken this sniper spot by cracking the wall CTs hid behind to give them less cover, but it only made the spot more overpowered, so he quickly returned it to how it was before. Later on, he felt the map was becoming T-sided, so moved CT spawns forward, but this made it too easy for them to guard the tunnel, so this change was quickly reverted as well. A few of the changes he made remained, like the custom skybox, the tweaks to lighting, and this change to the cover at Bombsite A. He learned more about this map post-release than he did while making it. He had several planned changes for Underpass, but never made any of them. He does sometimes wonder how it would have been different had he made those planned changes to its layout. But the map was popular as it was, becoming the most played FPS map in the world, and while it wasn't the best for competitive play, it was a favourite for newer players. And they wanted more. So Dave eventually got to work on Dust 2, which for now he called Dust 3. He didn't want it to be seen as a direct sequel. How could it ever be as popular as the first map? Oh, if only he knew. Again, you can check out Dust 2's development in detail on his blog. I'll just summarise here. By now, the Diffuse game mode had been out for a while, and the expected standard for maps was higher. So unusually for him, instead of jumping straight in and making the map, he sketched it on paper first. He said the sequel was important. It deserved careful, considered, detailed and thorough planning. A long and arduous process that would eventually span literally minutes. He tried to keep what worked with the first Dust. The sunny theme, the warm colours, the iconic arches and doors, the underpass. But he added new elements too, like a rock wall and spiral staircase. He wanted for there to be room for both close quarter combat and snipers on this map. And, on top of all of this, he wanted the map to be simple. Easy. Within a few days, he had made it, and unlike his previous Cobble map, everything ended up being the right size first time. While Dust 1 borrowed from Team Fortress 2, Dust 2 borrowed from Dust 1. You can see similarities between Bombsite A and this terrorist route to Underpass from Dust 1. And how about this terrorist route to B, which looks quite a bit like the CT spawn from Dust 1. Dust 2 went through some interesting stages. The spawn points used to be entirely different, with the terrorists starting near where Bombsite A is today. The bottom of middle had this mined out corner here. This is where it would have been today. And, you won't believe this, there was a bombsite at the top of middle, situated in a cavern. This is where it would have been on the latest Dust 2. Dave said that, thanks to Game Helper, this alpha version of the map was released under the name D-Dust 2. I couldn't spot many differences between this and the beta version, apart from the spawn points and, of course, the cavern at the top of middle, which was bigger and darker than I had first expected. Bombsite B started off being quite a bit simpler and flatter than the one we know now. Before its release, Jess Cliff looked at it and suggested new spawn and bomb locations, and also said to call it Dust 2, because calling it Dust 3 was silly. It appears that these were the right calls, because Dust 2 quickly became even more popular than Dust had been. It was fun for new players, and in competitive play. After early battles with Aztec, it eventually became Counter-Strike's most popular map, and has remained that way, arguably, ever since. I really have skipped many interesting details about these maps, so please do check out Dave's site. It's great to see that he's still posting there, having made one about 3D printing just 2 months ago. An often forgotten part of Counter-Strike's history is Condition Zero, an ill-fated sequel released in 2004. It never became that popular, but did ship with some prettier versions of both Dust maps, which you can see here. In some ways I think that Condition Zero maps look better than the Source ones, but you can see for yourself. For also released in 2004 was Counter-Strike Source, and with it, the Source versions of Dust 1 and 2. Other than the visuals, the other major difference was to the physics. Barrels and other debris within these levels could be shot at, moved about, used to cover the bomb, and to interfere with player movement. This was a particular favourite of mine from Dust 2. The maps did get small bug fixes. The skybox at Dust 2 used to be open at long A, so players could boost each other using grenades up and over the top of the map. At one point, players could hide inside the rocks. I've covered Dust and Dust 2, but there was kind of a third Dust map as well. Dave was contacted by PC Gamer UK in 2005 and asked to write some articles about mapping for them. He used this as an opportunity to create his first map for Source. Here it is. D-Dust PCG. It exists. It works. It's got some interesting features, though it was never intended to be a true sequel to Dust 2 or anything like that. A few years ago, with his help, I ported this across to CSGO, so it's playable on the workshop if you'd like to try it. In 2005, Valve released The Lost Coast. This was a one-off bonus level from somewhere along the Half-Life 2 coastal segment, but with improved lighting using HDR, which simulates how your eye adapts to bright and dark environments. In 2006, Dust received the HDR treatment, making everything overly bright and glowy. This is showing it on a newer version of Source, so it may have looked a bit different to this, but I remember the effect looking extremely strong. It slowed my PC to a crawl and made it more difficult to see people in most situations. But it did look nice. Counter-Strike still uses HDR, but the effect has been made far less obvious than it was with this map. Remember, this was a new and exciting technology at the time. They wanted to show it off. I believe that Dust was the third map to receive HDR, following Nuke and Militia. Again, it's worth noting that this was a different era. There wasn't matchmaking, there wasn't Twitch streaming, and there weren't tournaments anywhere near the scale of the ones today. I don't think people were as competitive. Back then, most people played Counter-Strike casually, for fun. Standards were lower, and most people didn't care about map balance as much as they did about having a good time and messing about. I enjoyed playing Dust with HDR, even though my PC couldn't handle it too well, and it negatively impacted my aiming. But HDR was new and exciting, and I still have fond memories of it. But it shows how much has changed. If they introduced HDR like this today, I think that most people would complain. We associate the Elite Crew terrorist models with Dust 2, but Counter-Strike Source didn't ship with the Elite Crew skin. They came out later in 2006, and unlike Global Offensive, where each map has a set player skin, with older Counter-Strikes, you could choose any skin you'd like to play on any map.
Report in, team.
Meanwhile, back in 1.6, strange things were happening. Valve were putting billboards on the walls of maps such as Dust 2, containing adverts for real products. These remained in the game until 2013, when it received an update that removed them again. Just an odd footnote in Counter-Strike's history, and one of the questionable experiments that Valve dabbled with along the way. And then, 4 years later in 2010, Counter-Strike Source received the Orange Box treatment. The game was moved to a newer version of Source, was given a new UI, over 100 new achievements, and it generally changed how the game felt to play. And Dust 2 also got HDR. And then, in 2012, Global Offensive was released, and the Dusts received yet another facelift. The map wasn't so bright or colourful, but was more realistic looking, and a hell of a lot more detailed. And Dust 1 got a change to its layout. Its underpass had always been difficult for terrorists. It was widened to give them a path that was hidden from CT snipers, and a stairway was built into the side, coming out above the underpass. This opened up all kinds of options for terrorists, helping them to gain a foothold on this half of the map, as well as offering them another angle into tunnel. CTs weren't forgotten about either, with a bridge being added across the underpass just here. This gives them a faster route into tunnel, but can also be used by terrorists. Bombsite B was moved for a third time. In CSGO it was placed closer to middle, which means it takes less time for terrorists to reach it and reduces the number of camping spots they must pass to get there. CSGO didn't just get Dust and Dust 2, but also SE additions for both, which simplified a lot of the details, removed the wires, dusty clouds, and so on. These were intended for competitive play, but I think what happened is that Valve decided it was too much work to keep both map versions updated, so instead dropped the SE series and focused on making the main version of the map more competitively viable. After all, doesn't everybody deserve good visibility? I have already covered Dust 2's many changes spanning 2012 to 2015 in another video, which you can watch if you like. I'll just summarise here by saying that it went through all sorts of small bug fixes and updates in this time. The big things to know are that in 2014, Short Dust was released, featuring a cut-down version of Dust 1 for use in demolition, and sporting a single bomb site set inside the mid-tunnel. This involved terrorists starting an underpass and having to plant in the main palace. Funnily enough, this featured a new route which was almost exactly the same as one of the changes that Dave had considered, but never carried out, in the original Counter-Strike. And then, everything changed in 2017. Since Dust 2's release back in 2001, it has been one of, if not the most popular map for Counter-Strike. It was certainly my favourite, but perhaps it was too popular. Maybe it was stopping other maps from being played, and had been watched so many times that people were growing tired of seeing it. So Valve moved it to its own category, away from everything else. It could still be played competitively, but could no longer be voted for in deathmatch or casual game modes. From 2017 onwards, you either played Dust 2 endlessly, or jumped into a map pool containing the other maps. And then, in October 2017, it received a facelift, sporting new textures and theme. It was a great moment, and introduced the version of the map that we know to this day. There have been bug fixes and stuff for this one as well, but I won't be covering them here. A month after the new Dust 2, Dust 1 was removed from the game, without even so much as a patch note. It was when Operation Hydra ended. The map pools were reshuffled, many community-made maps were removed, along with Vertigo, Aztec, Militia, and Dust 1. Since then, Militia and Vertigo have returned. Vertigo's had an almost complete overhaul, while Militia's been made dark and snowy. So far, Aztec and Dust 1 have not returned to the game. Maybe they will in the future. But for now, other than Dust 2, only Short Dust remains in the game. I can imagine that newer players will have loaded this up and thought, this isn't Dust, what with its one bomb site in the middle and lots of clutter blocking entrances up everywhere. But now you know. It's a reminder of where the Dust series came from, and the only trace of the first map that's left after 20 years of updates the game has had. Let's hope Short Dust is in the game as a tribute to the past, and not just because Valve has forgotten to remove it just yet. As always, thanks to Dave Johnston for providing such a well-documented and detailed account of the past. It makes videos such as this one possible.